The decision taken in the 47th GST Council meeting to apply a 5% tax on all packaged food items, earlier it was only branded items, which include everyday items that everyone uses like flour, pulses, curd, etc., has continued to be the biggest issue which is echoing during the monsoon session. The opposition has continued its unrelenting attack on the centre over GST and price hikes. For a second day in a row, opposition protested outside Parliament premises, defying the ban on dharnas. In fact, there was also sloganeering and ruckus on the floor of the House over the same issue. Both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha have been adjourned for the day amidst the ruckus. Congress also held protests in Karnataka, Telangana. TRS leaders also agitated against the centre's GST on dairy products. Well, the question now is, and the point that the government, the finance minister has been making, is that this was a decision by the GST Council. It was a consensus decision. So why all the acrimony now? To speak on this, I'm joined by Dr. Amit Mitra, Special Financial Advisor to the West Bengal Chief Minister and, of course, former Finance Minister of West Bengal. He's also a noted economist. So it will be very interesting to know Dr. Amit Mitra's views on what is going on in the country right now. Dr. Mitra, thank you for speaking with us. The first point is the claim that the GST Council decision is a unanimous one. What the GST Council decides is after recommendations from the Fitment Committee, which had a number of states on it, including West Bengal. So why the furore now, sir?
I think it's very important to understand that there was a time where the GST Council would truly debate issues and only arrive at a consensus and then take a decision. That was during the previous finance minister's period. I myself would often agree or disagree with BJP ruled states absolutely on merit, and we would all arrive at a consensus and hammer it out over days. That whole picture has changed. So this position that Honorable Union Finance Minister is saying that this was a consensus decision is absolutely and unfortunately inconsistent with what has been going on in the GST Council for the last 2 years. I have myself been present there, and I have repeatedly found that the voices of all kinds of people are not coming together, and Union Finance Minister's secretary at one time even closed a meeting without even cognizance of the fact that he has no authority to do so. And then all of us, 10 of us said, this is not okay, you open the meeting again. Meeting was opened, no consensus was reached, and then we heard the decision at a press conference given by the Union Finance Minister, and I wrote to her about it transparently and professionally. So to say that there was a unanimous decision to raise these GST rates of atta, for example, flour and packaged goods and all this, is absolutely inappropriate given the fact that there's a group of ministers chaired by the Karnataka Chief Minister, who's a BJP Chief Minister, which has not been able to arrive at a consensus, in fact has constantly delayed any increase in GST rates. Where West Bengal has a strong voice, a Minister of State has explicitly said, this is not the time to tinker with rates when the country is facing massive inflation. As you correctly said, food inflation is almost reaching food index of CPI, Consumer Price Index for food, which your readers will understand, listeners will understand, is reaching 8%. Now, connected to this, of course, is the continuous fall of the rupee, to which we can come later,
yes,
which has a direct impact on inflation.
But sir, may I please revisit the point that the finance minister is making, because she put out a series of tweets, explaining her position, and she says in one of them, and I quote, all states, including non-BJP states, in bracket Punjab, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Kerala, agreed with the decision. This decision of the GST Council is yet again by consensus. Are you saying this is not true?
I am saying that this I have personally written to her, saying that this is no way of calling something consensus, which it is not. In fact, one time, 10 states spoke against a position, and ultimately, as I said, no decision was taken on the floor of the GST Council, and we heard the decision in a press conference. And what could be more anti-federalist than that? I have written 3 letters to the Union Finance Minister over the last 2 years, finally bring a consensus environment which was there before, which we slowly eroded and lost over the last 2 years. Therefore, my submission is,
Yes,
there is a muzzling in a way of voices of what is called a consensus, where if it takes 2 days, 3 days, we hammer it out, we arrive at some agreements. To me, what she is saying is inconsistent with the last 2 years of experience. With due respect to Union Finance Minister, please read my letters to her. So it is not possible that West Bengal or Kerala or Punjab would have said, yes, raise the GST rate on anything, because there's a group of ministers. Please tell us. You have formed a group of ministers from the GST Council. They are still debating with regard to various rates. They have not given a decision, and I don't chair that. It's the Chief Minister of Karnataka, BJP Chief Minister, who chairs that, which shows there's an inconsistency in what she's saying. I don't agree with her. Having experienced 2.5 years of being in GST Council, respectfully I say, this is not a consensus. This is a majoritarianism.
sir,
So if I have the votes, because I have 21 states with me,
Yes.
if you don't agree, I will in a way hang over your head the Damocles' sword that I can always go into an election. That's not the way to function. That's not the way we functioned under the previous Union Finance Minister, late Arun Jaitley, and I've said that explicitly in a letter.
Let me come to the reasoning that the finance minister has laid out on why this decision was made. So she's saying 2 things. One thing she's saying is that even pre-GST, a number of states were taxing food items. It's not as if it never happened. There was VAT, purchase tax, etc. on a number of items, and states were doing it. That's the first point. The second point she makes is the only reason this was done is to create a level playing field, because the previous rule, which only taxed 5% on branded items, was being openly flouted. And those suppliers said that they want a level playing field. This was done to stop tax leakage. What is your response to that, sir?
I think my response is very simple. What she's quoting of the earlier period, people do not know that states had the power to do what they wanted under the VAT regime, entry tax, entertainment tax. That states gave up all these powers. 70 to 80% of taxing powers of the state, they got subsumed into the new GST. Why? Because there were 2 reasons. One is a consensus decision which the Supreme Court has now held up in this spirit, that the GST Council must hear these voices and arrive at a consensus. Why would Supreme Court say that? Because they are uncomfortable with what's going on. After having given up all its powers, the GST Council has to arrive at a consensus. Now the question is, any Union Finance Minister, including our Honorable Union Finance Minister, would know that there's inflation raging in the country, and most dangerous is the food index inflation. In the middle of that, you make any changes, it has reverberation into the marketplace, and it will push up prices further. Is that what the union government wants? It seems to me the anti-people government.
So what about the reasoning, sir? And I must lay all of these down. So what about the reasoning that you can buy all of these things unpackaged? You can buy them loose. Then you don't have to pay the 5% tax.
Let me submit to you that this has been a discussion for 4 years earlier. Not today. Before the Union Finance Minister became Union Finance Minister. If you look at the minutes of the meeting, you will find this has been discussed repeatedly earlier. Why didn't we do it at that time? Because there are complications in doing that. And on top of that, inflation was reasonably under control, say 4 years from now, 3 years from now. Today it is out of control. And on food inflation, hitting the common people of the country, is this the time to do this everybody will say this is not the time. All economists, what consensus? How can just common sense? It is not rocket science. That if you do anything to price structures, expectations change, and with expectations, any economist will tell you this leads to further inflationary pressures. I can't accept that West Bengal, Kerala, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, there so many states, even other states, anybody, even BJP ruled states, would accept anything that will trigger any acceleration of prices. And therefore, I don't agree. I know that there has not been a consensual environment. I know that the Supreme Court is pointing that out with a finger in spirit. And therefore, whatever the Union Finance Minister said, it is her right to say so, just as it is the right of all of us to say there was no such consensus. You spoke of the Fitment Committee. Are you aware that the Fitment Committee consists of officers? Now, you know that senior-most officer is the Revenue Secretary who chairs that meeting. Now, when the state junior officers, relatively like West Bengal, would protest on that, would it ever come into the minutes? No. In fact, the minutes of the GST Council's character itself changed under the existing Union Finance Minister, where the minutes would come much later and many things would be objectionable in the minutes. Therefore, please don't show me Fitment Committee. Seniority dominates in the baradari of the IAS, as you know. There's a limit beyond which the West Bengal's representation's voice is automatically lower. Then you come to GST Council. My submission to you is, I humbly say, there was no consensus over 2 years on no matter, was a spirit of consensus of federalism, accommodation, which Supreme Court points out, was there. So I am unable to most humbly accept
what next? The Kerala government on Tuesday has said that it does not intend to tax items sold in small stores in 1 or 2 kilogram packages. Will West Bengal look at something similar? Since you are in principle opposed?
Everybody. I would say not only West Bengal, we will have to take our autonomous decisions, which will be very sad indeed. Because we gave up all our powers to subsume into the GST. Now, if we are compelled for people's interest, for common people's interest, if we are compelled to take decisions which in a way are different from what the Union Finance Minister is claiming was a consensus, is indication to you that there was no consensus. In fact, each state going its own way in people's interest is going to undermine the whole concept of the GST Council and one tax, one nation. It'll undermine it. So she has in fact started by forcing this for states to take people-related decisions for which they have no option. So how do you go to the people and say, from today, I'm going to increase your prices?
May I underline this more clearly? So you're saying the state of West Bengal, and you assume others as well, will now come out with their own version of what to do and not tax smaller packets of food items at 5% GST?
They will have to, because of people's interest. They're elected bodies of the people. How can they go back to the people and say why inflation is hitting 8% in the country? Everybody's income has shrunk because of inflation, particularly the poor person who is earning 100 rupees, purchasing power of that 100 has become 70 rupees, food is not being put on the table, and now you say,
okay,
I'm going to make a change which will further cut into your inflationary pressures. No state with the elected democracy of India can accept this. And let me tell you, BJP states privately have agreed with me repeatedly that this kind of action, they don't know what to do with their people and asking us to fight on this issue.
Sir,
That's why I have written so many letters to
broader question, because you spoke about inflation, you spoke about the rupee, and you are someone who will look at facts as they are, not necessarily in bipartisan ways. Now, the inflation is now a global phenomenon. It's happened because of COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war. Many argue, the government argues, that inflation in India is relatively less than in other nations. As far as the rupee is concerned, they say it's the dollar that's strengthening, not the rupee. The rupee has performed better, in fact, relative to others. Is this an issue on which there should be broader consensus and an ability to understand it in terms of what we're all experiencing globally?
I think this global bogey has been made too much of. We have to look at domestic policy. And about 6 months ago, I said this with economics in one of the shows. And later it turned out that the studies done show that the major reason for unemployment and inflation relate to the domestic macroeconomic policy. Therefore, let me come back to this question. Why, when the rupee goes down in value relative to the dollar, every 5% increase, fall of the rupee leads to 1 to 1.5% at least, if not 2% increase in inflation. Now, what is very dangerous not being stated is foreign institutional investors are selling out of India. It can't be because dollar is strong. If you can make a buck in India, if you're confident about the Modi government in India, you would still stick with it. They are selling out. That is one of the big causes of inflation, or of the rupee falling. So when you pull out money from India, automatically rupee is under hit. Now, what are the actions the government could have taken? Today, Reserve Bank is forced to sell dollars in order to show this up. Please go back to the fundamental macroeconomic policy that this government has failed to do. Repeatedly, we have said, you're following a supply side policy of Ronald Reagan variety by cutting taxes. Corporates are making huge profits because they have no other way, because you cut their taxes and there's no demand in the market. You will naturally save it as profits. So the key point is, that rupee falling is 80 rupees a dollar is a record in Indian history. Mr. Modi, Honorable Prime Minister, had spoken as Chief Minister against the Manmohan Singh government. You know what the rupee was at that time? 53 rupees a dollar, and he was screaming about it. Today it's 80 rupees a dollar. And that is affecting inflation. And my simple point is, what is happening as a result of the fall in the rupees, even borrowing abroad becomes more expensive, which people are not talking about. So if you want to invest and you borrow from abroad, you can't do it because it's too expensive. The foreign institutional investors have voted with their feet by leaving India in large numbers and selling out. Only dollar being strong cannot be an explanator. If you're going to make more money in India than you can make in the United States, which was the case always because India was an emerging market, why should you leave? They are leaving because they've lost confidence that this government repeatedly is making wrong macroeconomic policy because they have no macroeconomists in the ministry, or they don't take the advisors seriously. Prime Minister's own advisory council has changed many times. People have resigned and gone away. So my submission to you is there's a bigger picture that the rupee has hit the worst situation in our history of 80 rupees. Recall Mr. Modi's objection only at 53 rupees a dollar. So my submission is, impact on inflation is significant because of the fall of the rupee.
Sure.
Exports are not going to have an advantage because many of our exports have import content. And therefore, imports become more expensive. I'm leaving oil aside. 80%
no doubt, a weak rupee will hurt in terms of imports. The question is it something that India could have avoided? But I know you're running out of time, so I will end it here and thank you, Dr. Amit Mitra, for joining us today on the show.
Thank you very much.